Get ready for the revolution. It's coming to you now. It's coming to you now.
So without further ado, we obviously have a very important subject that we have to talk about because, as a lot of you know, the corporate media goes to great lengths to make you think that this 1.9 trillion stimulus package, which, let's face it, there are some good things in there, but it's strictly a Band-Aid on a much larger problem. And so I happen to have read The Deficit Myth by Stephanie Kelton. It's a great book, highly recommend it to everybody. There's a lot of different ways that we could be moving forward economically in this country. And one of those ways, without question, is learning modern monetary theory and how the federal deficit, state deficits, county deficits, local deficits, those are real. But a federal deficit is not.
Okay, go on. Because you're pontificating about the academic stuff, but this is what I want to say. Okay, so our guest, this is the thing, okay? Let the lady talk. So I have known of this next guest, and this is very strange because I feel like it's someone that I know that I feel like I could have a conversation with, but I have known about him I can't even tell you how many years ago, back in the days of like the Sane Progressive. And Steve Grumbine was one of like the first voices that I heard really like that was inspiring that there could be a different way. Like this was before Bernie ran. I mean, this was a long time ago. And so this is kind of like a really cool thing. But anyway, so you want to sit there and talk all blah, 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 blah stimulus. So I'm just saying, yes, we could talk about that and MMT, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I was just going to say this is really cool. So Steve Grumbine, founder of Real Progress in Action and Modern Monetary Guy. And thank you for coming on after Jordan. Did you have enough time to deal with your kids?
Isn't that funny? Yeah, thank you guys for having me on. I'm so sorry. We were trying to get together back when I had COVID, and COVID was no joke whatsoever. So
I had it. I had it like a month ago, and I'm still kind of like 80%. He had it, but he wasn't that symptomatic.
I'm a lucky guy. Yeah. What can I say? But it's
not good.
It's taken people that I've known and, people Jen's known, there's a lot of reasons why this was an epidemic of proportions no one's seen in 100 years. And I think a lot of that just has to do in many ways with the system that we have. And I think we should just, go right into it. We have a restrictive economic system in this country by design. That is not the way it needs to be, nor is it the way that it should be. And I think the most important thing, Steve, to really jump into is for people to really understand how the federal deficit really is a myth. When you're a currency issuer, as I believe one of a dozen or so countries around the globe have, we can print money as we need to, and our main concern is keeping up with inflation. So if you can dive right into that in terms of
how we've been being lied to for basically our entire lives.
Not paying attention to that big billboard.
No, basically that we've been being lied to forever.
I've seen the billboard in New York City where they run the deficit numbers and tell us how terrible we are.
Yeah. So talk about that. Like basically it's a snow job that we've been all living with since the end of the gold standard.
Yes.
Yeah. It's definitely something like that. The bottom line is that anybody can create a currency. Literally, you and I can create a currency. The issue is, can you get it accepted? And in the case of the United States and the UK and Russia and China and Japan and Australia and Canada and really all over the world, any nation that issues its own currency can do this. It's not an American phenomenon. And MMT isn't something you really do either. That's the thing. MMT is a lens for which you can view the entire economy. And so when you look at the way people have laid out the economic battle, you see in particular progressives, well-meaning progressives, typically are asking, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to, fund this thing? Where's the money coming from? You're taking from Peter to pay Paul, and the mounting deficits, and it's a moral crisis and so forth. And so for years, I was a Republican, to be honest with you. I was right of Reagan, and all I could think of was, people are ne'er-do-goods. They're not, they're always taking my tax dollars and all the things that you see people talk about constantly. So when the great financial crisis hit back in 2008 and 2009, I lost a 17-year career, and I was like, something's amiss. And I started getting introduced a little bit at a time, spoon-fed, before all the videos and memes and stuff like that. And when I finally realized that basically a country that creates its own currency can spend, period. The issue is not a matter of ever can you afford it. The issue is always, can you resource it? In other words, do you have the real resources to provide Medicare for all? Do you have the real resources to provide student debt relief? Do you have the real resources to provide for a military that has filled the whole globe up full of bombs and tanks and planes and stuff like that? And of course we do. So the issue becomes, why is it always when we come down to talking about progressive change, when we're talking about taking care of people, that we're always hearing about, well, how are you going to pay for it?
Yeah.
And you go back to Hillary and you can remember her cackling at Bernie the first go round. It's pie in the sky. It's pie in the sky. And so these are the sorts of things that people get reinforced in their head. And so what MMT is, going back to 1972, when Nixon took us off the Bretton Woods Accord, took us out of the gold standard, really.
Yeah.
What we had was a fundamental shift from a gold-backed, commodity-driven, force redeemable world global gold standard based on the dollar. And when he removed us from that, something happened. The people that had money, the powers that be, the oligarchs, they knew what was going on. And if you look at the income levels, you can see it's like a hockey stick. It just ballooned straight up after Reagan and through Clinton and, Obama, you name it. So MMT allows us to see the economy as it is, not as people say it is. And you see the libertarians and you see the other folks out there that believe that we are constrained, that we don't have the money, that we can't do these things. And MMT shows us clearly that not only can we spend on anything that we have resources for, that we can do it as long as we have the votes, as long as we have the political power to make that happen. There's absolutely no financial constraint. There is no such thing as how you're going to pay for it, because every time the federal government spends, it literally spends with keystrokes. It literally wills that money into existence. So the idea of raising taxes to pay for things is anathema. It's not real. It doesn't have any basis in fact. So I think that's really a big thing right there to start with.
I don't know if this question has been asked or not, but it's just been kind of, itching me lately. Is there any point to federal income tax?
Yes, actually there is. So the reason for having a tax in general, you have to go way back to the beginning when kings were issuing sovereign currency, and they would have gold coins with the Caesar's face on it, render under Caesar and stuff like that. And the idea here is that the king wanted to create an aqueduct. They wanted to create a standing army. They wanted to create a road. They wanted to build something, right? A museum, whatever. And so what they would do is they would say, hey, I want to hire somebody for this gold coin. And the people would say, what do I need a gold coin for? I'm fine. I'm out here hunting in the woods. I'm, raising potatoes. I'm having fun with my family. And it's like, you've got a good point there. So how about this? How about I charge you 10 of these gold coins with my face on it to keep your house? The guy's like, oh crap, how do I get those gold coins? He's like, funny you should ask that. Let me show you. I want to build an aqueduct over here and I'll give you so many of these gold coins. And so the tax is what drives the need for currency. And it's kind of the circuit that keeps our economy going. It doesn't pay for anything. So the tax either can raise the buying power of the dollar or it can diminish. It depends on aggregate demand. And you can see that in terms of inflation. You raised the point of inflation at the beginning of this thing. And that's really the real constraint. How much inflation do you want to have in the economy? And so taxes serve as a brake or a gas pedal for the economy that drives the currency. We're in a tax-driven economy.
Right. But it doesn't go to our programs and how you don't have to balance it like that. You don't have to have it like that. That's a mythology.
That's correct. In fact, on Twitter, you and I went back and forth for a second, and I just was I put a great article out there by Raul Carrillo and Jesse Meyerson called The Dangerous Myth of the Taxpayer Dollar. And what it is all about really is what do you think of a taxpayer, right? What do you think about that? You typically think of a white dude. You think about a dude with a suit, the good people, the mom, pa, apple pie, make America great again, all that good stuff, right? And what happens is that people don't understand the difference between states and the federal government. The state of Florida, for example, has to have taxes, maybe not income taxes, but they have different taxes to fund the state-based programs. Just like if California wanted to have California healthcare, they would have to fund that literally with taxpayer dollars. But at the federal level, we don't have to pay taxpayer dollars for it. In fact, if you were to do Medicare for all for the whole nation, there's a lot of reason to believe that it would actually be deflationary, because anytime you have economic activity that is brought back into a more efficient state, you have less economic activity. So the chances of those real resources being freed up, it could really create a deflationary condition. So, it's just a matter of trying to understand the difference between states, which have to tax, and the federal government taxes, but for a
Right.
totally different reason.
Yeah, there's no question that knowledge is power, and this is one of the things that will ultimately change, because corporate special interests is what we harp on more than anything else, is what prevents us from getting where we need to go. And obviously we would love for, the squad, Ro Khanna, Marie Newman, and so on, Katie Porter, we want them obviously to do more than they're currently doing. But I don't think people really understand the scope of being maybe a dozen non-corporate representatives in a sea of 400 plus that are being funded by mega corporations that want you to believe that modern monetary theory is, it's pseudoscience. It's not real. This isn't how it works. Everything is based on, you give one, you take one. And I don't think people really understand the whole concept of the bucket, what that means. And I think understanding that a dollar in goes a dollar out, this whole idea that we're in a deficit, well, actually, no, it's $1 is taken out of one end and it's put on the other end. And that's sort of the idea behind trade. So if you can explain that better than obviously I can explain it.
Seriously, because I don't know.
Great.
All I heard was like, all I'm thinking of is there's a hole in the bucket.
Yes, I remember that song well.
So just remember, we spend money every single time Congress authorizes spending. We create new money every single time. Not sometimes, we never recycle a dollar. A dollar is spent by the government exactly one time. It never gets respent by the government. Once it's received, it's destroyed. And so really, you could think of the dollar as a tax credit or a tax liability waiting to happen. And there's no debt to that. The deficit is largely, the reason why we say it's a myth is because it's just the difference between the amount we tax and the amount we spend. But if you recognize that the spending and the taxing are not tied together, there's no real relationship there. The tax is there to drive the currency, to manage inflation. It's kind of like an EQ on your stereo. The spending, it's really all about, what do we need? What kind of an economy do we need to make our country okay? What do we need to make people be educated? What kind of investments do we need to make into the people growing up to make sure that our country is good? I look back, I've been studying the Haitian Revolution quite a bit. And one of the things that was very, very clear was they kept the slaves very, very ignorant. They blocked them from any kind of knowledge. They kept them very submissive, and they kept their head down, and they couldn't dream of anything better. Well, we have dumbed our country down right now to be like a modern day slave, where we won't resist. We don't think about the possibilities. We can't fathom anything beyond what these bad economists like Paul Krugman and others have said. So we sit there and we literally think that this is the realm of possibilities. We couldn't possibly write off all student debt. We couldn't possibly have a Green New Deal. We couldn't possibly do any of these great things that we dream of and we've read about, futuristic things. We can absolutely do every single one of them. If you can dream it, if you can resource it, we can afford it.
I want to ask you about something that it's funny, because I was getting ready to come on and I put on Status Quo, and there you are talking with Jordan. And so you said something that was really interesting that I never really thought about. I mean, we support universal basic income. It's something that we support, but not in and of itself. I've always said that's fine as long as it's not a substitute for, jobs or a living wage or healthcare. Like it can be an addition. But you really made this great point about the difference between giving people income either regularly or one time, and what would be more beneficial would be taking away their debt. Yeah. And that was, and it was I obviously I'd love to have student loans forgiven. I still have some, so it would be nice. But that was really, because what are people going to do with this money? Right. So would you explain that, like why the cash payment is not the answer to the problem?
Absolutely. So just for grins, I'll use the smoking cigarettes analogy. When you think about it, back when I started smoking cigarettes, they were like, I don't smoke anymore, by the way. But back when I did, they were like $2 a pack. Okay. Right. Now they're like $10 a pack or something like that. Okay. So let's say they base your UBI on buying $2 a pack cigarettes. Okay. So you got your $2 UBI, but now all of a sudden the UBI is $10. I mean, the cigarettes are now $10 a pack. Well, you got your UBI. The libertarians would like you to shut up and eat your peas, like Obama said too. Okay. But the fact is that you can't buy your cigarettes anymore. Okay. So what we see is that the subsidization of bad wages is really all you're getting there, because you're really needing something. There's something you want, a basic need you have. And if your UBI does not cover that, there's really not much point. There's not production also to back that up. And remember, inflation is usually brought on by not having the productive capacity to meet the demand. So like you see places where there's not enough, use something silly like PlayStation 5s right now, people that are going crazy for these things. Just using something that people can relate to, okay? But they're out of it. So you look online, you see them selling for $1,200, $1,300, right? Because there's just simply not enough supply to meet demand. And you use that as just sort of like a silly thing, but look at housing in New York City, or look at other places where there's a shortage of housing and there's a million people trying to get to it. That's kind of what happens when you give somebody a UBI. Here's $1,000, now go make hay. And you think about it, it's like if you give somebody $1,000, but it costs $1,100 to get healthcare, what have you really done for them? Now they get to go get subsidized by an Uberization of employment. So Ayanna Pressley has the right answer. She's got a federal job guarantee that she's advancing right now with the help of every modern monetary theory person out there, by the way. And the idea is that we could actually expand Social Security. We already have a system in place to provide survivor benefits, to provide retirement benefits. We could expand that to meet other new opportunities for people that maybe can't work. Okay. But the idea of providing a federal job guarantee does a couple things. Number one, you cannot subsidize a bad wage at Walmart when you're working a job guarantee. Why? Because you're already working. So in order for Walmart to hire you out of the job guarantee, they have to actually go ahead and meet or beat the package you got with the federal job guarantee. That is transformational. A UBI to everybody. In other words, universal, unconditional, everybody gets it. That's status quo. Status quo for Jordan. Status quo, though. Okay. So the idea here is that if most of these programs are intended to be what they call counter-cyclical. When the economy goes bad, people roll onto the job guarantee, or they would get their UBI in a different world. But the problem is that when it's just there, general prices rise to meet the available income. So you would always have to keep raising the UBI, which you've seen how effective we've been at raising Social Security, right? Non-existent. So really at the end of the day, what people need is their basic needs met, not just cash. Cash will only buy what's available for the price you got that cash for.
That's right.
Exactly.
So in the one person that can actually afford everything is the federal government. It can't run out of money. So if that's the case, then why put the burden on people to be really good stewards with their $1,000 when the government can just provide them healthcare, when the government can just provide them housing or food? I mean, why in the world would we sit there and say, now go do good things with this $1,000? Now go, be gone with you. It
Right.
just doesn't make sense to me.
What about, and talk about how easy it is for them to do a debt jubilee. And that's something that, right. And I remember you've been talking about this for a few years, at least. Like this is something that, and it's totally doable. And I just don't think people can wrap their heads around it. And that would be the easiest way to help the most people, without doubt.
Absolutely. So way back when, Stephanie Kelton and AOC and a few others did a panel on relieving student debt, getting rid of student debt. And really what you realize is that most of the opposition to student debt is not about, free stuff. It's really about, I paid my student
Yes.
debt.
Yes. I got me mine. You do.
Crabs in a barrel. Hey, you can't get it's like, hey, I was a slave before. You can't be free. What the heck, man? Come back down here. No.
Yeah.
And this is what we need to stop doing. We need to start celebrating victories. When I look back at the Bernie campaign and I look at Nevada in particular, and one of the most disgusting things I ever saw happen was the unions fought against Medicare for all because they had gotten good union benefits and they didn't want to see everybody get this. I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you? Why would you even think this way? But this is that dog eat dog capitalist world that we live in, where you literally, if you get an inch above, you're doing so much better, and everybody wants to just destroy you. And you go back a long ways, and you can see clearly that the reason why we are screwed is because they have always provided wedge issues every time we've gotten united, every time we've come close to being able to have collective voice. They give the poor white guy an extra 50 cents to keep him against the black guy. And now all of a sudden we separate once again. And this is going back. I used Bacon's Rebellion with Jordan. I'll use it again. It is one of the epic things where you saw people that were of the lower class uniting, whether it be good or bad reasons, they were uniting. And then all of a sudden they said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to give the poor white guys a little bit extra. And then all of a sudden the entire unity broke apart. That's the typical wedge issue. So this is why we need to really, really focus on MMT, because you're not going to hate your immigrants because you know that you can afford to house them. You know that you can afford to provide benefits. They're not taking anybody's lunch. They're literally coming here, and we need them. We need people to work, especially to mobilize for a Green New Deal. So a lot of these tropes that we have are, you wouldn't even have these conversations if people truly understood MMT. It'd just be like, oh, is that what we got to do? Do we have the resources? Yes, do it. Just do it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be having all these conversations.
Yeah, I think that there are definitely times where I recognize that I'm not going to win people over based on the morality argument in terms of how we treat the least of these, right? I mean, you're just not. And so it is really important to have a good economic argument for those people that are not as morally inclined. And so this is a really important part of that. And I mean, you had something you wanted to say.
I do think that there's a lot of people have misconception about the importance of having a federal jobs guarantee and what that means. A lot of, Andrew Yang is the most noted person in terms of the national scope that supported Jen's campaign against Wasserman Schultz, and, learning a lot about what he is fighting for. And I do think he's going to be the next mayor of New York City. I think that there is a mistake that is made constantly by people in the Yang gang and people who support universal basic income to not recognize the value of a federal jobs guarantee and recognize that having that is essential if in fact we're ever able to, we know how DC works, but if we're ever able to get to a point where we could have a green energy jobs focused infrastructure bill, being able to put people to work, there is so much work that needs to be done from an infrastructure standpoint alone. And having the will, if you will, to have people understand why MMT is absolutely necessary, it goes without saying that people just need to really understand it. But unfortunately, in our country, as you know, they have to understand it in basic terms.
Yes.
If it is not something that you could say as something as simple as make America great again, you're not going to convince people to listen to you. And that may not mean much, but if there is a MMT,
people like color wars and logos and slogans and catchphrases, and you can they don't really. We've lost all sense of. I thought about this a lot. We've lost all critical reasoning skills. When you talk to people, there's no reasoning happening. There's a regurgitation of talking points, and it's kind of freaking me out a little bit because, it's very Matrix-like for me in some ways. Like, it's kind of weird. But yeah, there's this complete we're drones. We're drones. And even worse, in this country is exponentially bad.
If you play the game of Monopoly, you already know that, if you run out of money, you can just start writing money down on a piece of paper. It's not a big deal. The bank never runs out of money.
Right.
And so the idea of it just being simply you can't run out of inches, you can't run out of pounds. All a dollar is a score. It's all it is. And we can never run out of points. Where do points from a baseball game come from? I don't know. Where do airline miles come from? I don't know. Same place. They're just keystrokes. And so if you think about it, as long as you have enough of these notches on your belt, so to speak, you can buy what you need, you can afford what you want. And so the issue is not whether or not the federal government that has the patent on this, that this is its way of provisioning itself, right? It issues dollars so it can buy things, so it can buy things for itself. It's literally keystrokes, and dollars spent into existence are taxed out of existence. It's a circle. I mean, I don't know how to make it much easier than that. It is a paradigm shift for sure.
It's a fiction. We're living in a fiction, and it's hard for people to understand that. People definitely like the idea of things being tangible, and it's a much more amorphous concept than how people imagine it. They think our government budget works like their household budget, and it just doesn't work. I try to that's not how this works. You don't create your own currency. You don't pay taxes to yourself. This is not how that works. And yet we have this image, and they fight over the money and the finances, and they've created this where we're drones.
If you can talk about what I think is the biggest obstacle of them all, and it is frankly, the thing Republicans do is they can't get on their knees fast enough for the rich and powerful, which is why they're always pushing for tax cuts and deregulation and things like that. The problem, which I think for something like modern monetary theory, is actually a bigger issue with the Democrats, because the Democrats are much more into bureaucracy and into having organizations that are just so government dependent. Things like, when people talk about student debt, like, why is college so expensive? It's because there's a bureaucracy. You have
to. They
to
feed their predatory friends.
You have to.
That's what this is.
You have to be able to have.
Friends.
If at a college that has 2,000 students and you've got a dozen vice presidents making $250,000 a year, where do you think that money's coming from? There's a reason why there's forever debt, if you will.
Yeah,
I wish people would understand that. I would like you to touch on that, and then we'll get into Milton Friedman and Ayn Rand and people.
Oh, my God, Ayn Rand.
We have to.
Oh my God.
But if you could talk about the bureaucracy problem first, that would be great.
So, we create jobs, right? And what I want to peel this back before I go too far down the path you just laid. I think this is really important.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I want to peel it back just a skosh. Okay. So you hear the word neoliberal a lot. Okay. Yeah. And neoliberalism is a very important term to understand and get right, not just use it as a pejorative, but actually understand it. Okay. Neoliberalism is about a radical approach to privatization. It is an economic school that wants to privatize. It wants to eradicate the public space in pursuit of the private space. So when you think about, if the government doesn't spend money into the economy, where does that money come from? Businesses don't create money. If the government doesn't spend money, there's no money in the economy, right? So where does it come from? It comes from debt. It comes from bank loans. It comes from all these other Wall Street shadow bank, payday lenders, you name it. And so when they create loans at high interest rates, this is how Wall Street fattens itself. This is how all these other nefarious actors, these predatory jerks, the bloodsuckers of our economy, this is how they function. So when you look at the idea of giving college away for free, number one, what it does is, it doesn't mean that they won't be paying it. The government will just be making direct payments to whoever's providing the service. But what it does mean, though, is that if you're not desperate, if I'm not desperate, and if everybody else is not desperate, then we don't have to toe the line. We can make different decisions for our lives, right? And so they need us desperate to keep us in control. And even Alan Greenspan let it out a couple of times. This is all 100% about making sure people remain desperate. Go back to my Haitian slave thing. They wanted to keep them desperate. They wanted to keep them without hope. And by doing that to us, we stay malleable. We stay, there's no other way. We've got to vote for Hillary. There's no other way. We've got to do this. There's no other way. We've got to do it. And they keep you in this very zero-sum game. There is no alternative mindset. By changing that around, by putting it into the public space and taking the burden off people and making so the government invests in each of us, what they do is they free us from the bond, or the bondage, if you will, of private debt. They free us of the bondage of being stuck, being scowled at when we use our food stamps for crab meat. When, oh, why are they getting crab meat? Oh, they got a nice car. Well, you know what? People with nice cars get laid off too. And this is the dog eat dog of the 99%. We always forget that labor is much bigger than just the poor guys. And that's why we are a huge block. If we focus on class struggle instead of this whole identity politics and stuff, we could really win the day. That doesn't mean we get rid of intersectionality, because there are real issues. Minorities are facing very real issues, and framing these discussions are very important to understand. Blacks, women, they haven't had power. So when you talk about the state providing these things, the state has failed them pretty miserably. So it's not hard to understand why they're skeptical. They've been failed by our government, by we the people. So it's important to frame these things in a way that allows people of differing backgrounds to come to the same conclusion, but it really must be about class and race. Now, back to your bureaucracy thing. We can fund all the bureaucracy we want. We don't have to save money. And this is one of the big things that you learn in MMT. We don't have to cut the F-35, though we should. We don't have to cut the F-35 to afford student debt relief. We can do both. The issue is, do we have the real resources? Well, we shouldn't be blowing real resources on a garbage plane like the F-35. We have more than enough bombs, more than enough planes. We need to start getting into diplomacy. So your point of bureaucracy, and they love their bureaucracy and so forth, that's job creation in the Democratic play. That's how they create jobs. That's how they get reelected. That's how they build their little soiree of, friends and donors and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's the story right there. I think it's really important to tie the neoliberal narrative into this so that you understand the reason why any of these things are even talked about is because we literally are being stripped to the bone so that Wall Street can own us.
And I think everything, the easiest way to see it, I think, is to point out things like how they just want to privatize things like education and take the money from the public sector and privatize. And the reason is that it boosts up their wealthy friends. I tell people it's like this nice big circle jerk that we're not invited to. And there's they just keeps feeding each other. They're just it's like you come out of this lobbying firm, you go into government, you go into this business, you feed your friends, they're predatory payday lenders, whatever, you all laugh about it. And it just keeps going. And we're all just watching this. I really feel like I'm sometimes I feel like I'm in the Truman Show. I really do.
Yes. And you know what, in a way you are, because we are the most propagandized nation in the world. We're worried about the KGB. We're worried about all these things. But in reality, if you just look at the way that we've heard history is told through the eyes of the victor, but it's also told through the eyes of the oligarchs. If you've read Howard Zinn, and
that should be required reading in high school.
Required reading
in high school. Yes.
Howard Zinn's, People's History of the United States is absolutely the only way to decolonize your mind and deprogram it. And you look back at history, I hear friends of mine talking about the American Revolution. That was a bourgeois thing. That was wealthy landowners that came to America trying to say, hey, we want to keep our stuff. We don't want to send it back to England. That wasn't the Poors rising up and saying we want freedom. They in fact, the Poors were sent off to fight in the Mexican-American War. They were sent off all over the place, So if you don't have a kind of a class analysis and an understanding of how power works and these power dynamics, this is all going to blow your mind. Every bit of what we're talking about is going to seem like poppycock. But you've got a huge wealth of history there to look at. Look at the French Revolution, for crying out loud. I mean, all these moments through history come together. And if you don't get rid of them, you kind of look at them through the lens of today, you can clearly see how we are being absolutely propagandized into believing all manner of nonsense.
This is also why there is a very serious problem right now, as Jordan and I are personal friends. Censorship is a real thing. And the more this message gets out there, the harder, for those who may not know, the three most powerful people in all of media, Jack Dorsey, I forgot the person who's the CEO of Google, and of course, Mark Zuckerberg, were in front of
the trifecta, the axis of evil.
Yeah, and I guess they were in front of the
YouTube
the House subcommittee of I don't remember which committee it was, but they're basically
they get to be in charge.
They're basically trying to suppress this type of message. And what's interesting, and this is a good segue back to Milton Friedman and Ayn Rand, they do not try to suppress that kind of message. So we've got a lot of these libertarians in this country, and listen, I'm very socially libertarian, but economic libertarianism is not feasible.
No, it's a joke.
I right now have my 20-year-old who has had to take the year off of college is going through his Ayn Rand phase right now. And so
we all have it.
Obviously, I know. And I said that to him and he's like, by what? I'm like,
you'll
whatever.
Understand.
Yeah.
You'll understand.
After Atlas shrugs, you're going to drink from the fountain and you're going to grow up and realize that you got to become a progressive.
Which is also why I don't think that the whole message of Reagan was really what stuck. I mean, obviously, I always try to tell people there's the Reagan in the first term and then there's the Reagan in the second term,
which was really Bush.
Everything went to hell. The truth of the matter is the tax cuts initially made sense, but when you do tax cuts, you're supposed to do it in a bear market. You're not supposed to do it in a bull market. You're supposed to raise taxes. There's this balancing effect that did not take shape. And we all know that Reagan cognitively was not there, especially in the second term. And, there were these voices, if you will, these influencers of the time that became really big commodities. And of course, Milton Friedman and Ayn Rand are two particular individuals that really come to mind, where a lot of people subscribe to their philosophy, the sort of Gordon Gekko philosophy of the 1980s. And we've kind of been stuck in that for 4 decades now. And I don't know how we completely unwind, peel back that onion or just, do away with that economic philosophy. But there has to be a way to show them that what they're preaching is wrong, and how the new ideas, the progressive ideas, is really the way forward.
Yeah.
So remember my fight against the UBI. My fight against the UBI is largely, why are you going to put the onus on the person to make good decisions in a world that they have very little control in,
when they shouldn't have to be paying those things anyway?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the thing is that Milton Friedman was the father of the UBI, basically. And his goal was to strip away the public space. They wanted to make the government so small that they could basically crush it. And that is an adorable dog. They wanted to make the government.
Hello, Lou.
No, I'm sorry. She gets needy. She'll just sit here for a minute.
I'm like so down with the dog stuff. I don't have one anymore and I miss it. So I'm living vicariously here. But if you think about it, the idea here is always pushing you to private sector solutions, right? Once you have cash, there's no need for money in the government. The government can do whatever it needs to do at will. So the money in the private sector is about you spending in the private sector. And so that means you're reliant on the private sector. And Milton Friedman believed the only thing wrong with capitalism was we needed more capitalism. So let's go ahead and give people a UBI and tell them to shut up. We'll strip away the public space. And this goes back to the Mont Pelerin Society trying to destroy the New Deal. And I mean, let's be fair, the New Deal wasn't great for everybody either. The New Deal saved capitalism, right? It didn't, there was a potential for a socialist revolution, and the New Deal was the great compromise. It wasn't like the great solution, it was the great compromise.
Right. He was saving capitalism, which is so funny. And then people think, oh, it was so socialist. I'm like, yeah, no, he was saving them from a guillotine. That's what he was doing.
Exactly it. And you think about it, right? Like here we are talking about, hey, we want a Green New Deal. Well, a Green New Deal is still largely saving capitalism once again. We're literally trying to bail capital out. Now, I'm telling you, I'm for a Green New Deal at the expense of us surviving climate change, right? I don't want to see you Floridians underwater, right? I'd like to see you, have nice lives. And
you know what? We might save this country, but I don't think we're saving Florida.
I think Florida's a lost cause.
I think Florida's a lost cause.
Florida's cause. We're going to have to accept that.
So we're really, I mean, listen, we joke about it, but we're the limp penis of the United States. We just are.
Oh, for
it's
God's
just,
sake.
when you think about it, it's like,
and New Orleans is the rectum. It's true.
Yeah.
We're joking earlier. I probably shouldn't let the cat out of the bag, but we were talking earlier about doing part of my show as speed dating with Robespierre and bringing all these people on and who's going to get the guillotine next. And I think DeSantis probably needs it. He at least needs the floods to take him, to a different place.
I'm not going to give this guy. Look, we've got a handful of libertarians that are in the chat and they're throwing their 2 cents in about everything. All I can tell you is, if you need to understand what happened during, if you need to understand what happened during the New Deal era before the start of World War II, see, everyone is under this illusion, and this is what the conservative messaging, as you know, took off in the 1980s. The idea is that the Green New Deal was actually a failure.
He was born in '83.
Yeah,
he talks like he remembers Reagan.
I was born in '69, and I, for real, like. Just to be fair,
71. Okay. I'm 71.
All right, so you guys are both the youth of today. I'm the elder here, right? The gray beard and all.
Well, no, you and I are Gen Xers.
That's true. I love it. I love it. Yes, but think about this, right? So I voted for Ron Paul. I loved Ron Paul. I thought he was the god of all things before I knew MMT. And once I realized the dude didn't know his butt from his elbow when it came to economics. And I mean, literally, the guy is like a zero when it comes to economics. The Austrian school is the biggest crock of kimchi of all time. And what the reality is that they don't understand state theory of money. They don't understand the fact that the state has the monopoly power of the dollar, right?
Yeah.
And so they try to make it, and this is something wrong with some of the public banking thinking too. I support public banks, let's be clear, but I don't support the mindset of the Ellen Brown school, which doesn't quite understand public debt, doesn't quite understand the role of the federal government. They still got a lot of anti-Semitism in that whole Rothschilds thing. I mean, just a lot of lunacy out there, right? I mean, let's drink the Kool-Aid together. But the reality is that Milton Friedman and libertarians have always believed in bootstraps, the strong, the makers, the takers, I mean, you go back to who's John Galt. I mean, look, guys, I was a Republican my entire life. Literally, I never voted for Democrat. I mean, I voted for Bush Sr. I voted for I'm Bob Dole. I voted for McCain. No. Did I vote for McCain? I think I did vote for McCain, actually.
That's a vote for Sarah Palin.
There you go. But I voted for Ron Paul, though, and so and I voted for Jill Stein. And so ultimately, I get the whole
Russian assets,
but the thing is, a guy like me, I get the whole, I have an article out there that I talk how I came to MMT, and I talk a little bit about the libertarian background. I talk about a little bit of the right wing background. I mean, I literally listen to Rush every day of the week. I mean, literally, mega dittos. I can beat a liberal with one half of my brain tied behind my back. All these things. I knew the stuff inside and out. Now I'm left, I'm way over there now because I realized that most of the things that made me over here are bullshit. They were wrong. They literally didn't exist. They were propaganda. And I have been bitterly angry ever since I found out. And I've been on a one-man tear before. Now it's great to see so many people knowing about MMT. But back in the beginning, when I first came out, I mean, we real progressives, we had, Debbie, this insane progressive that would come on. We had, Arn Manconi would come on. We had Claudia Stauber back in the day. We had all these folks. I mean, tons of folks that were on our show, Tim Black and all kinds of stuff were going on. And ultimately, the way algorithms screwed us up, kind of took us out of the game a little bit. But I literally, when I came out and said taxes don't fund spending, people thought I was a libertarian. They thought I was fighting for libertarian rules so I could get rid of tax because I don't want to pay my taxes and stuff like that. They didn't understand. And literally, I mean, I got trolled, I got doxxed, I got all kinds of horrible things. I lost a job. I mean, all kinds of stuff over this. But I have never stopped. It is the absolute 150% truth. And it is literally the kind of thing that, if you're in that right-wing cult of this whole Ayn Randian, Milton Friedman world, MMT is the solution, because once you have that big epiphany, you're like, oh my God, how many connecting points do I have to disconnect now that I've learned that, taxes don't fund spending, that the government is the creator of the currency, all these different things. Once you get there, there's you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
How much of that do you think played a role in the mindset of the way people dealt with COVID when it really started to take off?
100%.
This is like, I don't want the government helping me with anything. I don't have to take anybody's help. You're dying from COVID. Yeah, but I don't need help.
No, and then there was that whole mindset of every man for himself, pull yourself up from your bootstraps, which, by the way, that saying is a farce. It's not meant to be a real thing. It's meant as that's not possible. And yet people say that like that's a thing. That's not a thing. You can't do that. It's physically impossible. That's the whole point of it.
Exactly. I think so much of this whole, anytime I hear somebody say they want small government and they want a government, they don't want government intervention and stuff like that. I'm sympathetic because I see the way government has been co-opted. It's been captured. A lot of our institutions have been captured. When Democrats say that they're going to come in and they're going to save something, they're going to do something, and then they give you garbage. They have their rotating villain to knock it down.
Yeah.
Right? When you see this happen over and over again, it's pretty easy to see why people think progressives are full of shit. It's pretty easy to see why they think Bernie's full of crap. It's easy to see why they think AOC's full of crap. And reality is that, right now, if Joe Manchin can single-handedly stop things from happening, you can pretty much tell it's bullshit. And you look back at Cory Booker when he stopped the pharmaceutical thing.
Oh,
was that his turn to be the rotating idiot? Yes, it was. And so this keeps happening. And so it's real easy to say, you know what? I've had enough. I'm not going to buy it this time. You can't sell me another lie. You're rejecting. It's like being taken into the matrix and you're watching the girl in the red dress and you're eating the steak. You know it ain't steak, but damn it, you want to do it anyway because your mind says it is.
I
Ignorance
feel
is
like I'm in the
bliss.
matrix, but it's very, very difficult. And I think that, I always talk about people being bridges and connecting different groups of people and bringing them on board to ideas that they might not otherwise be exposed to. And I feel like in some sort of, accidental, reluctant way, I feel like I'm in a position to do that. So, that's, what we're trying to do, and get people who wouldn't otherwise be paying attention to politics or paying attention to economics to understand that they've been being lied to basically forever.
Right.
I say this all the time, and even though it's changing, if you could talk about how powerful the corporate media still is in terms of driving the narrative, doing I don't think people really understand how, like Alex AOC, she's the most beautiful girl at the ball right now, but she was basically given a warning the second she pulled that stunt in Pelosi's office. And it was like, this is your one warning. You do this again, and we will literally make you an outcast in this city, and we will have every news outlet coming after you with reckless abandon. You will never get anything done here, blah, 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 blah. I think the importance of people really understanding how powerful the corporate messaging is in this country. And I have an idea of how we can combat that, but I'd love for you to share your thoughts on that.
No, absolutely. As part of the quote unquote alternative media world, I do a podcast. I used to do a lot more video. I'm going to start back to video here very soon. But the idea of breaking through algorithms and fighting each, please share our stuff, please share our stuff, please share our stuff. And you're begging people, please, like your little tiny Tim, please pour some porridge, please share my content, right? Please donate. Oh yeah, there you go. Thank you. I mean, the idea here is that we're out there begging, and people just like, they're giving you the Heisman, they're giving you the stiff arm when you try and get them to share. You know what I mean? It's like, come on now. But that's it. That's how we get out there, right? Corporate media doesn't have to do that. You sit down on your couch after you've been worked to the bone, you plop down, your kids are driving you nuts, your wife or your husband's yelling at you, scowling at you because they're pissed off too. And you click on the boob tube, and sure enough, there's Rachel Maddow telling you Russia, 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 right? And then you've got Robert Reich going Russia, 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 and you flip the stage and you say, Russia, Russia, Russia. And
it must be Russia.
It must be Russia. Exactly. So you lose the ability to pull that back. If you remember, and it's hard to get that far back, but if you remember when Trump started, they had already tried to impeach him before he was even elected. They were already ready to impeach Donald Trump. Okay. Now, I can't stand the guy. Let me be crystal clear. I hate him. Right. But it's humorous. I mean, it's like, you didn't even have a real legit. You had so many real opportunities.
Don't do it. Not now.
They had no reason. They had no reason
Dude,
to come
you're
after
so
me.
good at that.
They had no. Listen, they totally had no reason to come after me. They never gave me an opportunity to be a great president, and they were really, really terrible people. And it's totally fake news. It's incredibly fake news. And you know what we're going to do? You want to know what we're going to do? We're going to start our own network, and it's going to be great. It's going to be the greatest. It's going to be incredible. I haven't thought of a name yet, but I'm thinking Trump TV. What do you guys think? Good name?
Go.
Tremendous name?
All right.
Really
Stop.
Oh, by the way, just so these people understand, MMT would not be good for me. It wouldn't be good for me. I'm successfully able to get people to do work for me and not even pay them. How would I get away with that if we had an MMT?
Oh,
I totally wouldn't be able to do that anymore. It'd be really terrible. Okay. Nice to see you, Jen.
Okay. Can you go, please?
You know how I knew that wasn't Donald Trump? The only thing that gave it away is he's got regular size hands. Otherwise, I thought it was DJ. I thought it was him, man.
I got a couple of good ones, but the truth is, the whole point of that was divide and conquer.
Yeah.
Yes, Trump was not capable of being president of the United States, leader of the free world, but they didn't want to get that. He was so much of a wild card that he may have done something as crazy as give everybody health care, or this MMT.
And yet,
sounds like a great idea.
They preferred him to Bernie.
Oh, 1,000%.
That was the clear choice.
We're gonna potentially have the writers of the book come on, and they admit in the book that suburbanite Democrats would have been okay with Trump getting a second term if Bernie was the nominee. And it just goes to show you how all of this is a class war. That's
We're
all this has ever
socialists.
been.
We're socialists.
You know, and when people look at the neighbor who's got the BMW, it's, well, now I got to get a Mercedes. I can't have this. I can't be driving a Honda. Not good enough.
And I think really the bigger issue is what we were saying before, the I got me mine. Now you have to get yours. This is something we see down here with our elderly community and a lot of people that already have Medicare. There's this attitude of, I had to wait to get Medicare. I got Medicare. Mine's good. Why should you get it now? I had to wait until I was, and it's the same thing with student loans.
There is no question that with the boomer generation, they're very transparent to their credit, where they basically say, I put in the work. Now you got to do the same as me. I don't give a damn how many years you have to wait. I did the work, and now I'm going to reap my benefits, and you can sit around for 30 years without having any.
Yeah.
That's basically it.
You know, it kills me. I'm a Deadhead. I love the Grateful Dead.
Yay!
I got like 70 million Dead shirts. I'm always bumming around. I got my dad hat on, so I look like freaking Castro.
How could
I went to Boulder. I went to see you Boulder.
That's very interesting how you could be a deadhead like Bill Walton, and yet somehow you found yourself falling in love with Ronald Reagan.
Deadheads are very
I wasn't then. I was a Slayer fan.
He's
I still am.
my age.
There you go.
He's my age. So when he got into the Dead was after Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, I sat there. I remember going to see the Dead in '93 at RFK, and they had this. They had a video of Round the Bowl of RFK of kids doing Ring Around the Rosies, and I was sober as a judge, and I'm like, oh wow, I'm just like, it is the best thing I ever seen. And you know, I love the Dead, but the point is that when you see pictures of Woodstock and you see these things, you realize, holy crap, these guys got it right. And then you look and you're like, you just voted for Hillary Clinton. What the hell's wrong with you? Wait, you voted for Biden? You didn't vote for Bert? What is wrong with you? And you know, they skew conservative. And you know, I guess I understand to a degree, because at that point in time, you're looking at, you know, my retirement fund. How do I survive once I'm not working anymore? And because we are in a capitalist environment where everybody's competing with each other, they're looking down their nose at you. And I get it, because that's the rules of capitalism. You know what I mean? It's not like they chose, but they could have done something different. You know what I mean? And so part of me regrets that, because you look at how beautiful the 60s were, you know, beautiful in terms of people being enlightened, people taking chances, people thinking differently. And it, somehow or another, they became like a soccer van people. It's like, what happened? Where'd you guys go? Where's Joan Baez? Oh, she's voting for Hillary too. What the heck?
Wait. Is that a thing? Did that really happen?
Yes. I mean, this is the thing, right? You look back and honest to goodness, the propaganda is real. The bourgeoisie in this country is real. I mean, this is we all are an embarrassed millionaire waiting to happen. Yeah. And so with that dream, the American fraud that we believe in, you know, people literally think, you know, hey, I work my butt off for my little teeny pension. You better work your butt off too, because it's not fair. I had to work my butt off. They're punching down, they're punching sideways instead of punching up the people that made it that way to begin with.
Okay, Steve,
but he's talking about it in terms of socioeconomically.
Yes, but Steve is the first person besides you who I've heard use the term punching sideways.
I used it last week for like content creators that spend more time criticizing other content creators. And it's like, we're all in the same sandbox. You're not helping anything. So I call that punching sideways.
What I also think is important, and this is a very important topic to talk about, because I think the hardest thing about getting across the message, whether you support UBI, whether you support a federal jobs guarantee, modern monetary theory, if you support Medicare for all, if you support a Green New Deal, if you support getting us out of these foreign wars, I don't think people really understand how powerful corporate messaging is. And it has to come to a point where the only way this is ever going to change is if independent media puts their egos aside and finds a way to come together. When that happens, then we will be able to compete. Until that happens, when everyone's looking to step on everybody else's neck and say, well, now I'm the top show on YouTube.
Yeah.
Listen, I say this all the time. You know, Jimmy has an amazing platform, but he has no concept whatsoever of how to build bridges. I think he wants to, but he just doesn't really know how to do it. And I wish he would, because there's so many of these independent content creators who kind of look at that same thing of, well, you know, I made it and, you know, there you go. But to Kyle Kalinski's credit, he made a great video the other day about how these channels are getting horrifically suppressed.
Yeah.
If we were to band together, we would be able to compete with the algorithm, because people would be using hashtags to be able to share. your podcast needs to be shared.
All of it.
Jordan's podcast needs to be shared.
Wait, let's talk about that for a second. So I know that our friend Savage Joy is working over there with you now. Is that
So Savage Joy left to go off onto Roar Media, I think is what it's called. She lives right down the street from me, ironically, out here in Pennsylvania. But she was part of RP for years, and she wanted to strike it out on her own and try something new, and so she went off and did her own thing. We've been around since the Harrisburg March for Bernie back in 2016, 2015, 2016. I think it was the summertime about 2016, right before the DNC. And from that point on, she came on board and she did all of our candidate interviews for years. We dubbed her Savage Joy, and that became her moniker. Good for her. She's written that Yaz Queen book with Pat Cote. She's doing good things. And, she's got some problems with her eyes right now. And so I'm pulling for her there. I mean, she's definitely learning a new way of life through the lens of being, visually impaired. So hats off to her for pressing through it.
She is a lovely, lovely lady.
Yeah.
One of the first people who gave Jen a platform when she decided to run for Congress, and is somebody who
we got ghosted by a lot of the progressives.
Joy introduced Jen to Mike Figueredo of the Humanist Report.
Yeah.
And that's really when it kind of took
shares
off.
the love. Joy pays it forward.
Yeah, no, she's great. And if anybody saw, the Medicare for All Forum that they did, a few months ago, I mean, her story is heartbreaking. It really is. And, that's why, we do what we do, because we know that the future rests in our ideas. If that was not the case, they wouldn't be trying so hard to suppress our message. And that's why we have to come together and figure out ways. And we have to cross network with each other and spread the message, because that's how it's going to happen. Is there anything you'd like to share before we wrap? Any projects that you're working on right now?
Promote.
Where to find you and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So our website is realprogressives.org. So we're a 501c3 on the one side for education, and we are a 501c4 for activism. That's called Real Progress in Action, which you rightfully.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So, but yes, I'm the founder of both, ironically. But the only reason why we had to split them was because we really are trying to become a think tank for everyone, so that we can take these things and be the people's think tank. If you think about it, most people they're not going to listen to a regular think tank because they're all lofty and academic. We need Jane and Joe Q public to be able to understand this stuff. So that's our role. As far as things that you can find me on, my podcast is called Macro and Cheese.
I love that. I love that. So
it's a labor of love. I really enjoy doing it, but we also have two other ones that are really important. In particular, the New Untouchables, the Pecora Files. We are working with real whistleblowers. When you were talking about the Reagan era, we worked with Bill Black, who brought down the Keating Five. He was part of that group that brought down the savings and loan crisis and went after 30,000 referrals for arrest. I mean, this is a guy who's ready to jail bankers. And so we got him out there. We've got Patrick Lovell and Eric Vaughn, who are the producers and co-producers of this docuseries called The Con. And this is a series about the great financial crisis, elite control fraud, and how to get a real new Pecora hearing like they did back during the Great Depression when the stock market crashed. They brought Ferdinand Pecora, who was ironically a Republican, to go ahead and tackle all the fraud. So we've got that one. Please check that out. And also a new one coming up here called The S Word. And it's all about struggle and socialism. And it's a bunch of us yucks that are just trying to figure it out. We're trying to get rid of the secret handshake. We're trying to get rid of the code words. We're trying to go in there as regular people so that the people that are fearful of that word can watch us go through our process, learning this stuff and not be scared. We need to get people to stop allowing the propaganda to affect how they see things. And so those are three big initiatives that we do. We also have MMT Mondays. Every week, our guy, Caleb Mood, puts out MMT Mondays. And we got a lot of good stuff coming in. I'm going to be coming out soon with my own little show called The Rogue Scholar. So look for more stuff coming.
Excellent.
Who would have thought talking about economics could be so much fun?
I never when I
Hey,
thought I'd
so-
ever
so
get to talk
powerful.
to you at all, like 5 years
Well,
ago.
have you
I
on
was
my
just-
show, for goodness sake. You're
Steve,
next. You're
Steve,
next.
please connect with John. We got to get Jen on your show. So let's
yeah,
trade off.
where do you live, by the way? Where are you?
I'm
Pennsylvania.
about 20 minutes outside of Harrisburg. I'm in York.
So you're in the countryside. Very
Yeah, I'm right by Ski Round Top. So
well, you're by the so he's not that far from where Tim Pool is. Like there's that section. Tim Pool's in Western Maryland, right by the border of West Virginia.
It's really close to that. Yeah, it's really close.
Yeah, I know that area pretty
That's
well.
beautiful there, though.
Yes.
So you live like kind of rural.
very, very rural. I'm from DC, ironically. My entire life, I graduated from Maryland. You know, I moved out here years ago and haven't been able to leave since.
No, that's so nice.
It is.
You know what? When you can get away from the hustle and bustle, you know, the
Yeah.
truth of the matter is, you know, for all the issues we have in this country, there's a lot of places you can live that are not that expensive because there's not a lot of people there.
Well, that's the thing. There's just too many people here.
Yeah.
There's just too many people.
And that's
There's
the
just
thing,
too many
you know,
people.
and again, this all gets back to the whole idea of MMT. You know, it's inflation. It's inflationary living in South Florida. And
Oh,
why
it's
is
harsh.
that? Because there's too many people here and there are limited resources. So when that happens, cost of living goes way through the roof.
We have issues.
Steve, you were
Thank you
fantastic.
so much.
We hope you'll come back. And of course, let's get Jen on your show. And
He's always
Got it.
promoting.
of course, you got to, because we're all in this together, baby.
Thanks, Steve.
Absolutely. Thank you guys very much. It was great.
You're very
Bye.
welcome. Take care, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Get ready for the revolution. It's coming to you now. It's coming to you now.